Hello and welcome everyone. In this quick start tutorial for Inventory Cog 1.4, we're going to be looking at setting up basic inventory, which includes categories, item setup, equip and store points, skin mesh renderers, loot objects, item previews, crafting recipes, and the inventory DB. To begin with, we're loaded up in the sci-fi inventory demo, and we're going to jump into our categories. So in sci-fi, we only have the two categories, character and loot. Anything that's equipable, we've put into character, and anything that's non-equipable is in loot. You can get a lot more detailed with this, obviously, so you only need one category minimum. If you're not going to section off your items, you could just have one overarching one named inventory. You can do something very simple like this sci-fi inventory demo, which has two, or you can get more detailed with the stylized adventure inventory, which has armor, bows and arrows, food, key items, materials, shields, and weapons. And the categories are a way of separating the items and also controlling the item count. So if we look at a category, which we can create by right-clicking and doing Create Talk Inventory Category, we'll see we've got two main sections here. We've got a UI section, which we can supply an icon, a display name, and a description. And in behavior, we have items detailing how this category is behaving. So by default, we display the category. If this was unchecked and you were throwing up a category list, which we'll cover in the next video, it wouldn't show up. Category unlocked, also by default, the same sort of thing. Unless it's unlocked, you can't assign items to it. Has max slots. If this is checked, it will have a maximum number of items that can be stored into that category at one time. And you can also have locking slots, and if you do, you can specify how many slots are unlocked, and through things like in-game purchases or achievements or quests, you can increment how many slots are unlocked. And so if you had 4 unlocked slots with a maximum of 10 slots, you'd only be able to carry 4 items in that category. The last item, ammo, is slotless. So this concept allows you to not take up a slot with anything that's marked as ammo in the inventory type. In this case, you could have 25 different ammo types, and you would still have 4 slots left available to use because ammo wouldn't count. So now that we have a category, we can go into our actual item setup. And let's take a look at a couple of these real quick. So we've got quite a few options in inventory item. We've got behavior, stacking, equipping, UI, preview, repair, breakdown, stats, and custom tags. I know it can be daunting to look at all those items at once. They're mostly optional, and they're here to allow you to expand the system. So don't worry, they're all very easy to understand and mostly self-explanatory. So if we look at a behavior, we'll see that every item needs to be assigned to a category. In this case, we're in the first demo, so we've only got character and loot. Because you can equip an arrow, it's in the character category, and we have it set as an ammo type. Because it's an ammo type, we get this ammo type string, which could then be consumed by, if you had a weapon and it used ammo, you could tell it that's the ammo type to use and how many per usage to take. You also have things like containers, which can contain other objects, consumables, and so on. Let's change that back to ammo. So can drop, if you're allowed to drop it, you can optionally put in a prefab, which will be generated and placed in front of you when you drop that object. which we do use in places. I believe the branch here, yeah. So the branch, when you drop it, will drop that object in front of you and remove it from your inventory list. Display in list tells us whether or not this should be visible. By default, it is. Use slot ID is for your customization. It's not directly used by Inventory Cog, but if you wanted to create a custom UI and put things into specific slots, you could do it this way. Free slot when equipping is for certain game types where you don't want an equipped item to remain in your inventory taking up a slot. By default, this is not enabled, but you can check it, and as soon as you do, equipping an item will remove it from your inventory. If you equip a new item that goes to the same slot, the existing item will go back into your inventory and the new item will take its spot. Next is stacking. This is a concept I'm sure we're all familiar with. By default, it's not stackable, and so each one count of an item takes up an own slot. If you select stackable, you can tell it how many items can be in one stack. You can also say that there are a maximum number of stacks. So if we look back at our previous example where we had 4 unlocked slots, if we set a max stacks of 2, even if we had 4 unlocked slots, we could only store 2 stacks, or in this case, 128 items. Equipping, if you select can equip, then it will be able to be physically equipped to your character. And you can also select can store. This is used to put it into a storage slot somewhere on your character, which we'll be covering next. Equip object is a prefab that tells us what object to instantiate there. Auto equip is whenever you add this item to your inventory, either through looting or quests or whatever else. If this is set to never, it won't auto equip. If slot is free, it'll equip only if there's an available slot for it. And that's an equip point slot, not an inventory slot. Or always, and it will always equip itself. And if there's something in its point, then it'll remove it. Equip points gives us the point IDs that we can equip it to. This can be multiple. So if you had 2 or more different points that you could equip it to, it would find the first free one to equip. If there was no free one, it would equip to the first one. Next in this section is animator mods. And these are mods to apply to the animator of the character, either when it's equipped or unequipped. And the use for this would be if you wanted to change your animation based on what you had. So you could have an unarmed animation, and then once you added a sword, you could move over to your one-handed animation or two-handed animations with a staff. Next in UI, this is just general UI information, icon, display name, subtext, description, and this item called item tags. Now, that's not used in the sci-fi inventory, but if we look over here at an item in the adventure, we can see that it is used, and these are created in the same way as all the other items, which is to right-click, go to Create, Talk, Inventory, and Item Tag, and these just apply an icon, a text, and the color to apply to those. And we can switch over real quick and have a look at what that actually represents to us. So we're going to go over here and we're going to loot a shirt. And then if we open up our inventory and move over into the armor category, we can see here's its name. This is the category icon. This is that tag that we were just looking at. It's telling us it's a skin mesh. And here's the description. These 4 stars represent its rarity. In the sci-fi demo, it's actually a color in the top right triangle that tells us its rarity. Moving on to the next section, we have preview. This allows you to create a object in view to look at while you're looting it. Sci-Fi Inventory uses this, and we'll look at that after we go through the rest of the items here. Repair, you can assign a condition value to items between 0 and 1, 1 being pristine, 0 being broken. And you can select Can Repair, and at that point it will show up in your repair list as long as its condition is less than 1. You can supply a repair increment. By default, we have it at 5% for each repair. Increment cost, this is for your use if you were to have in-game currency or mechanic or anything like that. For inventory cogs purposes, if you wanted to repair it with items, you would select the components here. And then for each set of these components, you would be able to repair it 5%. So if you had 2 bananas and 1 pauldron, really random choices there. But if you had 2 of those, you could repair it 10%. Or, if we pumped that up to 50, then that would be 100% repair if you had those items. An inventory cog will automatically repair it as much as you have the components available for. So the player isn't going to have to press it, 10 times to fully repair it or anything like that. Breakdown is the ability to break down an item into its components. It's sort of the opposite of crafting. You can supply a category in here, which you can use for filtering. You could have a station that only breaks down armor and a station that only breaks down weapons, or you can leave it blank and have something that breaks down everything. And then you simply supply what components will come out of breaking it down. Next we have stats. There are 3 default ones that are in here, which is rarity, which we saw how it can be displayed with stars, or in a moment we'll see it with colors. Weight, which is used only for containers. Containers can have a max weight assigned to them. And then value, something that would be for your in-game currency, and is not otherwise used by GameCog except to display it. Custom stats are exactly what they sound like. They're custom, they're for you. They're name value pairs of a string and a float. Custom tags are also custom to you, but can be used for filtering as well, which we'll cover in the second video that goes over UI. All of these items do get saved and loaded. Inventory Cog is supported on multiple characters, multiple players, multiple containers, and they can all be saved or loaded. They all have a .save and a .load. And you can do that as either a file name or as part of a stream, so you can create your own custom file format if you like for that. So now that we've looked over all of the options for the item, let's start the demo real quick to have a look at the item preview and the rarity color. Okay, so if we look right here, we can see yellow. That's the rarity indicator. In this example, instead of stars, we use different colors. And we can also see these spinning pants right here. This is the preview object that we supplied, and it's instantiated in another prefab that's created by GameCog for you. And the scale is set as we defined the scale over in the item setup. In this case, the pants are scaled to 0.5. Okay, so now let's look at how we equip things. So if we pop into our Nancy character, we can see these customization points, and those are skinned mesh objects that we can replace with other things. Particularly, we replace the torso and the legs quite a lot for shirts and pants and things like that. And the point ID is how we reference it in other objects. So if we look here, actually let's look at the legs. This is a skinned equip point, and we reference the legs skinned, which is the Oh, sorry, that's its name. My mistake there. That's its equip point ID. And then we have a bone source, which remaps the bones for you. This only works if you're using the same skeleton with the same bone name. If you're using, and the same order, if you're using different bone orders or different skeleton, there's a solution for that, which is called the skin bone remapper. And let's take a quick look at how we use that. So we're just going to drag up this this model, which we use for the Deadly Daughter bodice. And this is, you can see it's got an animator attached to it. It's a skin mesh renderer. It's got a armature to it. And if the bones were going to change, we could do a skin bone remapper, hit the automap button, and it will automatically fill in the names and the indices for us. And what we would do to make sure that we don't replicate all of this unnecessary stuff of the bone transforms and the animators, we would drag just this skin mesh renderer down into a prefab. Of course, we have to unpack it first. Now, one thing to note when you are doing something like this, it's not going to be visible inside of the editor at design time. You will see it at runtime. So just don't be alarmed if you see this empty box when you're working with skin mesh renderers. So now let's return back to Nancy and have a little further look into these equip points. So those were our equip points for skin meshes, but what about static items? So for these static items, ones that aren't animated and replacing, now they can be animated and be in a regular equip point as well. They just won't be replacing anything. And so what we do for those is we just drill down to the bone that we want, and we attach an empty game object with an equip point to it. And again, we've got to give it an ID, and this is how the inventory cog is going to find it to attach the item to it. We can optionally supply a store point, which in this case we do, and it's right here, and it shows us that's where the object is going to go if it becomes stored. And in design time, you just move your objects around to make sure you get them in a good location, then you drag them into a prefab. We can have force other storage on equip and force other unequip on equip. I know these are a bit of a mouthful and they may be a little hard to understand at first, but let's take a real quick look at what they do. So if I were to equip something into the left hand and I had an object in the right hand and I needed that to be stored, sorry, let's do the two-handed one. There we go. Then it would store that way. Okay. Or I could instead unequip it. So as soon as I equip something into the left hand, if I had something in the two-hand slot, that would unequip. The gizmos just shows us how we're going to draw the gizmo, and you can update that to display or not display and set the scale as is appropriate for you. So now if we just jump in real quick and we'll grab this branch here, which is an equipable static object, and we'll go over to character and we'll equip it, and we can already see in here that it's equipped, and if we exit out we can see, there we go, it's animating with our bone, it's following us around exactly as we would expect. And if I go and grab, let me just jump over to storage here so that we can get some other object to replace it with, right? And see what that whole force store is all about. Now let's hope I didn't break anything, because we were just in there changing some items around, messing with the equipment store points, but I think I left it in a good spot. So we'll just grab all. And so let's equip the hero sword. There we go, it's replaced the branch, and the bows are two-handed, so that should do that. So let's look at this again a little more closely. So now we've got an item in both hands, right? We've got something in the left hand, we've got something in the shield hand, and a bow is a two-handed object. So if we equip that, we have this set to automatically unequip the other ones, and we can see them are back in our inventory now. So that covers the loot items, or sorry, not the loot items, the item previews, which you just saw, the skin renders, the equip points, item setup, and categories. Let's look at what a loot item is. So a loot item is just going to be a basic prefab, and all that's going to really give us is a reference to the item that we'll add. So if we drag in this banana here, we can see, there we go. We can see that it's just the mesh with, in this case, an LOD and a rigid body, but the key component here is this loot item, and that tells us what item to add to our inventory, in this case banana, which we can see set up over here, how many to add, whether or not it can auto-equip. So if it's set to auto-equip and we don't have this checked, it will not auto-equip. We can set the loot rarity to be whatever the default for the item is, a constant value, a random between two constants, and we can do the same for condition and value. We could also have something happen on loot, like we could play a sound or a particle effect. Next, we're going to have a quick look at crafting recipe. So again, right-click, create top inventory crafting recipe. And this is how we make new items by combining items in the system. So as always, we've got the UI section giving us an icon, display name, and description. We've also got the ability to define a crafting category. This can be used for filtering again in the stylized adventure inventory. We have different crafting stations. We have one that does armor and weapons, and then we've got another one that does food. And that's controlled by this crafting category. Whether or not the recipe is unlocked, and we can see that if we pop back in real quick here and head over to crafting, we can see that this item is locked. It can't be crafted. These items are unlocked, but we don't have the necessary items to craft them. Okay, and then brand new to Inventory 1.4 is the success chance. By default, it's 1, so you will always succeed when you craft. You can set it to less than 1, and Inventory Cog will automatically do a random number generator to find out whether or not you succeed. Components specify the items that are required to make it and their count, and the Inventory Cog will automatically check for you whether or not you have enough of these and display that back to you. A success result, so when this has been crafted successfully, when it passes its success chance, this tells us what and how many to add to our inventory. We can do multiples. And the same thing with failed, except for when you have not passed your success chance. Now finally, let's see how we get this all into a player. So also new to Inventory Cog 1.4 is we have this static object. So you'll just create an empty game object and assign the inventory DB script to it. And that will make this item follow you from scene to scene and keep all of these objects in it. This is every available category, every available item, and every available recipe. They are not instantiated. They are shared between every inventory cog, which we'll go and look at here. In Nancy, she has an inventory cog, and what the inventory cog does is it will pull in those categories. It will pull in whatever items it needs and instantiate them so that they are unique to that specific character, whether it's a player character, a non-player character, or even an inventory container. And we can see a bunch of UI items in here. That'll be covered in the next tutorial, which goes over the UI. But that's all you need to get started. you've got everything you need to just go ahead and have the character and have the inventory and pick it up. The last thing that we'll look at real quick is an inventory container. And this is like a pared down version of Inventory Cog. It can take in items and remove items, but it doesn't categorize them at all. What it can do is it can have a maximum number of slots. In this case, the locker has 42 slots. It could have a maximum weight, and it can have starting items in it to begin with. So I really hope that you enjoy this, and I hope to see you over in the second video. Thanks. Have a great day.